Okay, so we're about 1 minute. We're really doing really well on time today. Just congratulations to all of our speakers and hosts for keeping time so well. This is wonderful. We now have Ken and Brenda joining us this afternoon. And our topic of conversation will be driving results when the world was still with GeoTab. Ken, I can't see you yet, but we're waiting.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, let's see.
Oh, is your, maybe it's just, if your video is displaying, it might just be that the cover on your camera is over. It says your camera is on.
Camera is on, so I probably have to just juxtapose it. Well, why don't I try to do that for the next one and introduce Brenda in the meantime?
Excellent. Go ahead and jump off.
Great. So Barcoding Inc. is an integration partner with GeoTab, and I'm happy to introduce Brenda Nguyen. We have many customers that are utilizing the GeoTab platform today, and some of them have the most complex workflows and pickup and delivery. Through GeoTab, they're realizing improved safety and compliance, and and they're also using the data that comes from GeoTab to really enable breakthrough fleet performance. So, wondering if I'm paused here.
We can hear you perfectly fine, Ken.
Fantastic. Okay, so Brenda Nguyen is a data scientist with GeoTab, and she has a master's in computer science. Prior to GeoTab, she worked as an analyst and a consultant for companies like Deloitte. And since 2017, she's been with GeoTab working on their smart cities projects, and most recently helping to drive better optimization and utilization outcomes for fleet customers. On a personal note, she has a 1-year-old baby, and some of you will be hopping mad to hear that her baby sleeps 10 hours a night, which enables her to have some quality video game time with her husband. Brenda, what do you got to share with us today?
Hey, Ken. Thanks for the intro, Ken. Let me share my screen first and see if that works. Okay. Let me know if you see my screen, Ken.
I definitely
see it loud and clear.
See the presentation?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Sure thing.
So yeah, thanks for the intro, Ken. So hi, everyone. My name is Brenda Nguyen, and thanks for joining us online. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy during these times. I'd also like to thank Barcoding for inviting me to speak at this event. And I also think this is a great initiative to celebrate our essential workers in supply chain. So thank you for all your great work. So today, I guess I'll be doing something a little bit different. So I'll be presenting some of the work that we at GeoTab have done during COVID-19. But I'd also like to keep this as a discussion more or less. So if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat, and I guess Ken will let me know if I need to answer any questions. And also, please feel free to interrupt me if I don't see any signals on me to answer any questions. Okay. All right. So, as Ken mentioned, again, I'm a senior data scientist at GeoTab. My role on the team is to build data and machine learning products in areas of safety and productivity, like utilization. And for those of you who don't know who GeoTab is, we are one of the largest telematics companies in the world, offering innovative software and analytics solutions to our commercial fleets. As of date, actually, we have collected over 40 billion data points per day across 2 million vehicles around the world. And this is just not only GPS data, we're actually collecting a ton of accelerometer data and engine data, such as car battery voltage, RPM, temperature, and other engine agnostic data on the vehicle. So with all of this data that we have, what can we do with it during the time when the world has slowed down and is technically standing still. So we believe that with great data comes great responsibility. So today I'll be showing you how we leverage telematics data to help industry, government, and our customers understand commercial vehicle activity in real time and make informed data-driven decisions during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. So our journey started with a simple question. How can we use this data to help? So around like end of March, early April, we assembled a team of 20 data scientists and include some marketing and privacy folks. And our aim was to build building blocks that could help our, the industry, government, and our customers gain insight during the pandemic. So we set up like 15-minute daily sprints with our team just to create like a sense of urgency and to have something to rally around during this time, because we were all working remote back then and we still are right now. So doing these three things, this led us to creating some public data sets that I'll show you later. We also released some blog posts related to the insights that we found with the data sets, and we've created an interactive dashboard that's available to anyone for free. So I'm just going to show you some cool insights that we found with our data sets. So one blog post that we released was on city congestion. And this is actually based on a data set that we released on our data portal, which I'll talk to you more about later. So in this blog post, we looked at 7 major cities in the US and Mexico City. And we looked at various metrics such as average speed through the intersection, average number of stops, average stop time at these intersections. So just looking at the heat map in the bottom corner here, this is showing average total time stopped at an intersection by day. And each row represents a city. So the colors represent, so if it's more yellow, that means you're spending a longer time at the intersection on average. And if it's more blue, that means you're spending less time. So for example, we're seeing, at least from each city here, that weekdays are becoming weekends. So for example, if we look at New York, so prior to COVID actually, we saw that New York on weekdays was making an average stop of, so commercial vehicles in New York City were making an average stop of 42 seconds on weekdays. And on weekends, they were spending about 37 seconds on the weekend. So that was prior to COVID. But after the lockdown, we're seeing that the weekdays and weekends are merging into one. So you see that's almost like one color. And the average stop time at intersections was about 37 seconds. So this kind of tells us that congestion has decreased significantly after the lockdown. We also showed average speed of commercial vehicles in New York City by the hour here. And so this is where most the lockdown policies have started. So March, I think it's like March 15. So you can see that average speed has increased after the lockdown. And all the spikes that you see here are average speed measured during nighttime. So this, we haven't seen much changes here. But if you see, if you look at there's like two dips in speed prior to the lockdown. And those 2 dips represent the morning and evening rush hour. And after the lockdown, it virtually disappears. So you don't see those 2 dips anymore. So this is just to give you a sense of how we can use these building blocks to see these city level insights, and that I guess you wouldn't be able to do with leveraging telematics data. So we also released a blog post about CO2 emissions. And the way how we derive CO2 emissions from commercial vehicles is based on how much fuel they used. So this heat map is looking at a couple of North American cities, and we saw that there was a huge, well, not huge, but quite a significant amount of reduction in emissions. So just the way how do you read this graph is This is showing the percent of typical CO2 emissions by day, and each row represents a city. And the more yellow the cells are, it means that you're operating close to typical CO2 emissions before COVID. And the bluer the cells, it means that you're operating less than typical emissions. So just to give you an example, if we look at New York City, we see that they had the largest reduction at around 38%. So the commercial vehicles that were operating in New York City, they emitted about 38% of the typical CO2 emissions pre-COVID. So that's quite a reduction. Whereas in Vancouver, we didn't see that really happening, which is pretty interesting. So again, this is just a macro view by city, and this wouldn't have been made possible without leveraging telematics data. So we've created about nine or so data sets related to COVID, and this is available for free for anyone to use through our data portal called GeoTab Ignition. So we did this because we want everyone to be able to benefit from the wealth of insights that you can get from these data sets. And so if you are curious on how to use these data sets, or you would like to just play around with the data, feel free to access it through our link here. It's condition.geotab.com. If you need help getting access, you can check out our Getting Started guide as well. So within GeoTab Ignition, we have, so some of the COVID-related data sets are, we have airport traffic, border volume, border wait times, city congestion. So that was the data set that was used to give the insights in the blog post that we talked about previously. Also, we have commercial traffic, fuel station fill-ups, and port traffic and truck border wait times. And just to mention as well, within GeoTab Ignition, we have a visualization tool too. So you can use a SQL query SQL query is pretty, I think, so anyways, sorry, just to backtrack a bit. So GeoTab Ignition uses BigQuery. So it has all the data sets saved on there, and you can use BigQuery, standard SQL, which is very similar to other SQL tools out there. So you can use that to extract all your data, and then we have a function to visualize this on a map. So this tool is really neat because it can visualize a bunch of large amounts of geospatial data at scale on a map, which is really hard to do within your Python notebooks because it can't hold that much memory, and it's not as efficient in visualizing that data. So anyways, I thought that was really neat. So if you want to, or if you need help in extracting this data or visualizing this on our tool, we have white papers on our site that kind of guide you on how to do this analysis. So just to give you an example of how other organizations have used our data is our collaboration with Deloitte. So they were able to go live with our data in 3 days. So, so just to give an example, on the first day, they made a request to us. On the second day, we sent them data just so that they can test it out, see if they want to use that data. And on the third day, they integrate with our API. So to have that live connection of data. So here you can see that they are showing, oops, my bad. So here they're showing commercial traffic data on their dashboard, and they summarize some of the stats to their liking. So if you are interested in using our data and using that live API integration, you can contact us here on this link. And again, all this data is free, so there's absolutely no charge at all. Also, here we go. Oh, did this freeze? I think my presentation froze. Sorry about that. Just refreshing my presentation here. I've never seen this happen before. Oh. Just give me a minute here.
Hey, Brenda, while we're waiting for this to come back up, I'm curious, was there anything as you were going through this that really took you by surprise as you started to go through this data?
Let's see. So I guess I was surprised that, like, this one blog post here, I was surprised that Vancouver didn't have a reduction in emissions because they were also under lockdown at this time. So that was pretty interesting. Okay, I think, can you guys see my screen now? Yeah, right.
We can.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that was just one of the insights that I saw that stuck out to me. But yeah, I can go through more because I was just going to show you the dashboard that we built. So, so we at Deloitte, not Deloitte, at GeoTab also created an interactive dashboard that shows commercial vehicle activity in North America. So the idea here was to see how commercial activity was trending over time after the lockdown and beyond, and see its paths of recovery. So here's some screenshots of the dashboard. I also provided a link here in case you want to see the live version of the dashboard. So at the very top of the dashboard, we show 3 indices that are based on weekly data. So the first index here is showing the state of commercial vehicle activity in North America. And we also show how it's changed week over week. We also included an index for cross-border trade within North America and fill-up activity as well. So just to give you an example here, so if we see, so as of week June 15, we're seeing pretty great numbers here. So if we see any of these numbers hit 100% or more, it means that we're operating above pre-COVID levels. So just to give you an example of how to read this, so on the week of June 15, for commercial vehicle activity, we see that the activity is operating at 98.87% of pre-COVID levels. So if we hit 100%, that means we're operating at pre-COVID levels. So that's the way how we measured pre-COVID levels was from February to March 14. So it looks like we're reaching pretty closely there to 100%, which is great. And if we look at, we also show percent of commercial activity by day as well, and each line represents a country. So after lockdown, so after March 15, we see a drastic decrease in activity in countries like Chile and Spain. And then more recently, we see that other countries are kind of recovering now. So Canada, UK, and Australia are operating closer to normal levels pre-COVID. So we also show activity by state and province as well, in case you want to see it geographically. And if you scroll down the dashboard, we show commercial activity by industry. So the blue line represents percent of normal activity. So normal meaning pre-COVID levels. And the green line is just showing you what the baseline levels would be. So that's just basically 100%, right? So we saw some interesting trends here. Like, so for transportation, where it's non-freight related, we saw a huge drop after lockdown, and it hasn't really recovered ever since. But in industries such as construction, we saw a drop down as well, and it's now slowly creeping up back to normal. And similar with government fleets, we see that there's a slight decrease, and now they're operating close to normal. And for freight transportation, we see that it's been fairly consistent after lockdown, aside from the few dips here, which is when the holidays were. And if you scroll down further, we also show commercial activity, so cross-border trade between Canada and the US and Mexico and the US. So for Canada and the US, we see that after the lockdown and when the borders closed, we saw like a decrease in activity, which is to be expected, right? So it was operating quite at a low level, around like 60, 75%. And more recently, looks like there's been an increase in activity in June. So we're almost quite back to normal, which kind of makes sense as restrictions are being lifted, and I guess there's more trade, more businesses coming back to in operation. And for Mexico and US, this is interesting. We saw that there was relatively more activity happening between US and Mexico compared to Canada and US. So we don't see much of a dip here. And we see that now they're definitely operating back to normal levels. And one last thing that we show on the dashboard is fuel fill-up activity in North America. So this is showing what the activity is like on a daily basis. And each line represents the vehicle type. So we show bus, light, medium, and heavy duty trucks, multi-purpose vehicles, and passenger vehicles. So after the lockdown, you see like a huge decrease in activity for buses, which makes sense because the schools were closed. Passenger vehicles, same thing. There was a huge drop, down to 60 and to like 50%. But now we're seeing it slowly creeping up back to normal as well, which makes sense as restrictions are being slowly lifted and more people are going back to work. One interesting thing that we saw was for trucks generally, after the lockdown, there wasn't much decrease in activity at all until like the long weekend. So like so around mid-April to like May, the activity level started going back to normal. And what's even more interesting is that this light blue line here, that represents light duty vehicles. And that like had a huge increase at the end of April and onward. And we think that's because of the increasing demand for delivery vehicles and of course their need to fuel up more often. So that was an interesting find there. So we also show this fuel fill-up activity geographically as well, in case you want to see where people are filling up most often. And yeah, so that's some of the insights and tools that we built by leveraging telematics data, and that we hope, or that we believe it will help industry, government, and our customers gain insight during this pandemic period and make informed decisions. So some closing thoughts. So while the world is, has slowed down and we still face many challenges ahead, I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to leverage any data or insights that maybe you may have in your organization and then share it with the world, right? So what worked for us was by gathering a team and setting quick and impactful sprints, and then rallying the team behind clear goals, like building these data sets that we can provide to everyone, to the public, and just start developing for tomorrow's problems. So yeah, so I hope this was interesting and insightful, and yeah, thank you for the presentation. Yeah.
Got a question for you, Brenda. So how has GeoTab utilized the data to maybe improve smart cities, or to provide data at a municipal or at a city level to, to help a city from a planning perspective? And does that translate today in this COVID age, whereas you saw the kind of the uptick in what you think are light light duty deliveries, right? Which is, we think, most certainly omni-channel, e-commerce to home fulfillment. Anything that, anything to talk about how cities are, are using this data for better planning? And does anything change with this, this new reality that we're facing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So personally, I don't know if there are specific governments that are making like real decisions right now to implement at this moment. I know that from what I know, that the city congestion data that we have and commercial traffic data that we have does give insight on how congestion is happening throughout the after the lockdown and now. So I think that can inform on how you design traffic management, so traffic light management. One concrete example I can give you that it's separate from the data sets I've shown here, but we are working with one of the municipalities in the US where we're creating an app that looks at intersection data that is very similar to this blog that you see here. All the data that you see here, we're using very similar data to inform one of the municipalities in the US on how to manage their traffic lights. So I can see that changing some of the, I wouldn't say it's policy, but it is changing how they manage traffic. So I hope that answers that question.
Sure. And one other question, can you talk about how customers and, enterprises, we serve enterprises in the supply chain, particularly in logistics and delivery operations. How can they use the data in GeoTab to, to do, better, better decision making, right?
Yeah.
Isn't your tagline, what is your tagline? Is it
manage by measurement?
There we go. Managed by measurement. So how are folks using your data science applications and the data capabilities at GeoTab to, to drive better utilization of their fleets?
Yeah, so related to supply chain, so just looking back to the data sets that are available at GeoTab Ignition. So we have a data sets so we have one that's called like truck border wait times. So that basically is saying, that shows you what the average wait time is between waiting at the border. So we have many border stops between Canada and the US. So one of them is like Niagara Falls, right? So we have hourly average data at those border points. And I think that could help supply chain fleets maybe manage manage what time of day we should deliver, right? So if you're looking for optimizing your schedule for the week, and you don't want to waste too much time waiting at the border, maybe this data set can help inform you when's a good time to schedule the deliveries. So that's just one example. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Brenda. I think that's all we have from a question perspective. Anything else, Judy or Jen?
I don't think so. I don't think that we asked Brenda, though, what makes her a supply chain geek. I think she has, up until this point, skipped that question. So what do you think, Brenda?
How am I a supply chain geek? Well, I definitely rely a lot on the goods and services from supply chain.
Yep, I think that your presentation proved yourself here. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And the link to GeoTab's white papers and to their website in general is in the chat. So you can go take a look at this and play around with this data on your own and check it out. We really appreciate your time. Ken, thank you. It was great questions there at the end. And thanks for helping put some context around this.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.